Like what we're doing here at Cube4Two? Click the like and subscribe button to let us know. Also, Cube4Two is now a TCG Player affiliate. Click the link in the show notes for all your shopping needs to help support the channel. Alright guys, let's get started. What's good, Cubers? It's your boy Matt.
And your boy Daniel.
We're back and we're upgrading the Card Kingdom Starter Cube, and we're giving away a copy of this upgraded cube at the end of the video. Big shout out to everyone who donated to UNC Hospital last week. You're entered to win, and next week we're going to give away a copy of this cube. Stay tuned for more details, but we have got to get going. Now, for those of you who missed last week's episode, click that link in the top hand corner, go back and watch that video as we upgraded the white, blue, and black sections of the Card Kingdom Starter Cube. But if you're too lazy for that, we're going to recap what we're doing really fast. We got a question from CBS on Reddit that he just got the Card Kingdom Starter Cube and he wanted to upgrade it any obvious first steps. He made it clear to us that he wanted to do a $50 to $70 budget this first time around and then upgrade it into a traditional unpowered cube over time. So we're going to try and do that for him, and we're going to try to avoid cards that are going to have to come out later. We're going to try to avoid middle of the road cards, things that he'll have to cut as he does future upgrades so that he can get as much bang for his buck as possible. Now, like I said, last time we did white, blue, and black, and that leaves us red, green, colorless, gold, lands. Holy crap, we've got a lot to do. Let's get started. One of the archetypes that this starter cube pushes in red is obviously red aggro. They play all these different 2-drops, but aggro decks don't need 2-drops. What do they need, kid?
1-drops.
Kids are rocket scientists. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut a lot of these 2-drops and we're going to go down to more 1-drops to increase our density. Now, we don't get Goblin Guide because of budget, and we don't get Monastery Swift Spear either.
Thanks a lot, Pioneer.
But we are going to play all the best 1-drops that we can afford. So this upgrade is pretty easy. By the way, take a minute and look at the Careless Celebrant up there. We're cutting the Satyr Tribal out of this deck. Yes, there is a Satyr Tribal sub-deck. We're getting rid of that. And the Human Pilot is for the Dwarf Vehicle deck that we're also pairing out as well. Like I said, we're playing good 1-drops. Here we go. We're going to cut all of these guys, and instead we're going to play Bomat Courier, Frenzied Goblin, Village Messenger, and Zurgo Bellstriker. All of these are solid 1-drops that you'll get to keep in your cube as you upgrade over time. The two real missing suspects are Monastery Swift Spear and Goblin Guide. They blow our budget, we can't do it now, but that is something you're going to want to look for as you do your next upgrade. Frenzied Goblin is great, being able to turn off blockers is really good. Village Messenger, if your opponent doesn't cast something on turn 1, and a lot of times they won't, this guy flips almost immediately and you've got a budget Goblin Guide. Zurgo Bellstriker is another Goblin Guide-esque creature. The difference here is that he doesn't have haste. Bomat Courier will keep your hand full into the late game, just like he did in Kaladesh Standard. Card is sweet. Let's move on, though. Let's look at the rest of the 2-drops that are happening in this cube that we want to cut and try and help our aggro deck. Underworld Ragehound is not very good. I don't like the 3-1 that's easy to die. The Escape is neat, but we can do better. Stampede Rider is part of the bad Satyr Tribal deck that's inside this cube. Yes, there is a Satyr Tribal deck inside this cube. We're cutting it out. And it's got this 4 power matters thing going on, which is a theme in Gruel.
So I have to have 2 creatures to make him good?
And that's exactly why we don't want him. We can do much better in the 3-mana slot. Arena Trickster, when you cast your first spell during your opponent's turn, he gets a +1/+1 counter, so he's like this flash Izzet spells mattered thing. We can do better. And the Thermo Alchemist is a classic pauper spells matter kind of card, but again, there's a much better 2-drop to take his spot. So let's upgrade all of these guys, and we're going to turn our first creature into Earthshaker Kenra. I love Kenra. He gives haste, he allows your creatures to swing in unblocked on turn 2, and he has some late game reach with Eternalize.
Dad, can we play Goblin Rabble Master?
No, we can't. We're on a budget. You do want Goblin Rabblemaster, but we're going to play his best good friends that are affordable, Krinko and Hanwar Garrison. These are our budget Rabblmasters, and again, they're still not going to have to come out when you upgrade the cube. You do want a copy of Goblin Rabblemaster, but making tokens, going wide, it's a really solid effect for all the 3-drop creatures. So if you want to go deep on that, you can. You can even pick up Najeela the Blade Blossom or Goblin Warboss, but I like Najeela and Rabblemaster way better than Warboss. Lastly, we're going to put in Young Pyromancer as another bonus for our Spells Matter deck. Whenever you cast the instant, you make a 1/1 red elemental creature. So he's fine in the burn deck, he's fine in the aggro deck, but he's also pretty doggone good in like the Izzet Spellsy deck also. Now, as we move up the curve, we're going to see some more subpar cards. These are suboptimal cards. For 3 mana, you get the On-Crop Invader. As long as it's your turn, he has first strike, pay 1, sack another creature. He gets +2/+0 till end of turn. So he's kind of helping the sacrificey deck. The first strike is decent. But it's too mana intensive. The aggro deck wants to be tapping out every single turn, and you don't want to be sacking off your board for the On-Crop Invader. You'd rather go wide. And the Firebird here for 4 mana, flying haste. He attacks each turn if able, and when a land enters the battlefield, you can actually summon him out of your graveyard. This is a pretty decent effect, but there is a much better cube staple 4-drop that we could be playing in her spot as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the On-Crop Invader into the On-Crop Crasher. And I like this guy so much better. 1, haste is key for an aggressive deck. And 2, you can exert him to make another creature not block, and that lets the rest of your board through with him. So turn 1 in a 1-drop, turn 2 Earthshaker Kinra, turn 3 On-Crop Crasher. Now you're really rolling. The other card I want to add is Flame Tongue Kavu. Now, Kavu is great at the top of the aggro deck's curve because he can come down and remove that big blocker, but he's also decent in another deck.
The mid-range deck.
Yeah, one of the other problems in red that I saw inside the Card Kingdom Starter Cube is there weren't a lot of great creatures for the mid-range deck, and the top end needs some help. So we're going to put in the Kavu to help both the aggro deck and the mid-range deck. Now, the Card Kingdom Starter Cube has another huge problem in red section, and that is they are playing all the crappy burn. That's right, all the subpar burn. They're playing Lava Dart, for goodness sakes.
That card is trash.
Yeah, for some reason they're running a lot of 1-damage burn spells. We're not living this life. And then Trumpet Blast is okay in retail limited, but in cube you really need to be able to go face. Also, Trumpet Blast is pretty much only good in the aggro deck, whereas a generic burn spell could help our control decks or our mid-range decks, so these are easy upgrades. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut and we're going to play Burst Lightning, which is solid because you can kick it and get a little more oomph late game. Volcanic Hammer is just a 3-damage burn spell, creature or face, or Planeswalker now, thanks Aradas, so that's pretty solid. And then Incendiary Flow is a very underrated, should be played more cube burn spell, 3 damage, and then if the creature dies it gets exiled. We don't get Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning, they mess up the budget, but those are easy adds for you later. Next, the cube plays Kari Zev's Expertise to gain control of a creature and steal and swing with it, and then Collateral Damage is a 3-mana burn spell if you sack a creature. Now, Kid, what do you think this cube needs here?
More, better, burn.
So it might not be sexy, but the fact of the matter is more decks want burn out of the red section than almost any other card, so we should go deeper on it and we should play better burn. We're going to cut these, and instead we're going to add in Magma Jet. Deal 2 damage, scry 2 is super solid, and then Arc Trail is a good burn spell for almost any deck, especially the control deck, because they can split the damage up. You can deal 2 damage to target creature or player and 1 damage to another target creature, so you can 2 for 1 with it. You can blow up their 1-drop and their 2-drop aggro creature if you're in a control deck splashing red. Now, that brings us to the next set of bad red cards. They're playing Pyrophobia, which isn't horrible, but it's missing the one thing that a great red burn spell needs.
You can't go face with it.
Your burn decks want to be able to burn out their player with that last burn spell in their hand, and you can't do that with Pyrophobia. Pillage is a land destruction, artifact destruction spell. In this cube, you're mostly going to use it for artifacts, and it's okay. I'd much rather it be a Braid, but we can't afford a Braid. We're on a budget, but that's a card for later, CBS. If you're upgrading later, a Braid, absolutely. And then Flames of the Raised Boar is a red board wipe for 6 mana. It deals 4 damage to target creature they control, then 2 damage to each other creature they control with power 4 or greater. So I guess it's supposed to be a board wipe. We're gonna lose this card for sure. Now, when we upgrade, we're gonna turn Pyrophobe.
Faithless looting? That is way different from pillage.
You're right, it is very different from Pillage, but it's going to be good for our Spellsy decks, and like I said, we need a Braid. A Braid, Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, those are the 3 we're really missing. Now we're going to turn our bad board wipe into a decent board wipe, and this lets the control deck extend into red. Now you could have a Jeskai control deck or a Grixis control deck as well. Storm's Wrath deals 4 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, which is going to become more relevant as you guys add walkers to this cube. Still, it's a very serviceable board wipe for any control deck playing red. Now, as we look at the top end of the red curve, I want to try and help out the control decks just a little bit more. They're missing some solid top end threats, and our mid-range decks don't have great threats either. They're playing Magmaw, which lets you sacrifice a non-land permanent to deal 1 damage.
Yay, 1 damage!
Yeah, sacking a permanent to deal 1 damage isn't exactly intimidating on a 4/4 for 5 mana. And then Mob Rule, I guess, is meant to be a finisher where you snatch all your opponent's creatures and swing in one good time. But I'd much rather have a card that just fit into more decks in our cube, more mid-range decks and more control decks. So we're going to splurge on the back end of the red budget, and we're going to pick up a solid mid-range finisher, and we're going to add ourselves another walker, baby, yeah! Now, would you rather pay 5 mana for a 4/4 that you have to sack permanents to deal 1 damage, or would you rather pay 5/5 for a 4/4 with Riot and Flying, and if you Riot with the +1/+1 counter, you can start paying 4 to deal 2 damage to 1 or 2 targets. And then Sarkhan the Masterless is going to come in and make a dragon. And don't let that static text fool you. When a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, each dragon you control deals 1 damage to that creature. When you play Sarkhan and make the dragon, suddenly your opponent can't attack you with anything that has 1 toughness, because Sarkhan will just murder it. He literally has turned off token decks in my cube matchups before because the token player can't swing in with all their 1/1 soldiers. So Sarkhan is the real deal. The boy's legit. Neither of these cards is coming out for a while. Alright kid, time for an update. How are we doing on our budget?
Well, we spent $8.17.
That's going to take us to green, and green had some really weird archetype stuff going on. They had tokens and mid-range, but they were also playing a 4 power matters theme. You can see that on the Crunch Wrangler up there. I don't like that theme. I think 4 power matters is just too conditional, so we're going to cut a whole lot of that. And also, it tries to run a ramp package with a couple of the cheapest mana dorks. And so we're going to try and upgrade that ramp package because just 2 mana dorks in the cube as a beginning point is a tease. That deck doesn't really exist. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut all these bad 1 and 2 drops and just add in a few more mana dorks. This is going to help our ramp deck and our mid-range decks actually have something to cast that's meaningful for them on turn 1. We got to really up the density.
But Dad, Arbor Elf will only untap basic forests.
You're right about that, and in a traditional unpowered cube, which is where we're going, Arbor Elf will get a lot better when shock lands or original dual lands. Proxies are for real, guys. Feel free to play those. But he'll be a lot better in a cube that has those kinds of fixing rather than the tap lands that this cube runs. But for now, he'll be fine. He'll untap a forest. He's basically a Landwar elf. And then as the cube gets more powerful, so will Arbor Elf. Now, as we look on, we still have a couple other bad 2-drops. I'm not a fan of Plummet. It's just too conditional. It's mostly a sideboard card. And then there's that bad 4 power matters theme again. So we're going to cut both of those, and we're going to go deeper on our mana dorks. We're going to play Wild Growth and Paradise Druid. I love both. Wild Growth is essentially another Landwar elf we can cast on turn 1 that's much harder to remove. And Paradise Druid is sweet. Hexproof is so relevant.
She's not gonna die to lightning bolt.
Yeah, you're guaranteed to get at least 1 use out of your Paradise Druid before the burn player can bolt her away. We are on a budget though, so we're not going to get really awesome 1-drops like Birds of Paradise or Noble Hierarch. Those upgrades will have to come later. Birds of Paradise is $4 or $5 now. Thanks a lot, Commander. So we really can't just pick one up to slam in our cube, and the Hierarch as well. Well, she's pricey. So let's keep moving up our curve though. We have the Boneyard Worm, whose power and toughness is equal to the creature cards in our graveyard. That's because green-black runs a self-mill theme. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later when we get to the gold section. Overcome is supposed to be a green finisher where all your creatures get swole and swing in. I'm going to pull that out and I'll replace it with a different kind of effect later. And then Wild Wanderer is ramp at the 4 mana slot. And 4 mana ramp is... what's the word for it?
Bad.
Yeah, 4 mana ramp is bad. So what we're going to do here is we're going to help our ramp deck even more, and we're going to take all our ramp down under 2 mana. We're going to play Wall of Roots. It's a great staple for green decks that are trying to slow down red burn decks. Fertile Ground is a wonderful color fixer, and very similar to Wild Growth, it's really hard to remove. And Incubation Druid is a very solid mana dork. He only gives you colors that you already have, but he does turn into a Gilded Lotus with a really relevant body in the late game. So all of this is going to help out our ramp deck. And speaking of bad ramp, the cube also plays District Guide and Ranger's Path. Kid, what's wrong with these cards?
3 mana and 4 mana ramp is too slow.
The ramp deck can't afford to wait around till turn 3 or 4 to start ramping. You want to be able to cast your ramp much sooner. So again, ramp has to be below 3 mana. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut District Guide and Ranger's Path for Sakura Tribe Elder and Rampant Growth.
It's Steve!
Yeah, we all love Steve. Sakura Tribe Elder and Rampant Growth will fix your colors and ramp you, so I love both of these cards. None of this stuff is going to have to come out of your cube. It's all the beginnings of a solid ramp package. Still, let's slide up the curve a little further and look at a few more bad cards. Grapple with the Past is part of that Golgari self-mill package, where you mill the top of your library into your graveyard, and then you get a creature or a land out, and you put it to your hand. And it also lets decks dig for their fatties. We're going to talk about replacing that effect, and I'm going to do a few different things to do that and keep that Golgari deck online. Renata is one of our mid-range threats. She's 4 mana for a something 3 toughness, and that's the thing I don't like about her. She's pretty dependent on what your devotion to green is, and even if your other creatures are entering the battlefield with +1/+1 counters, I'd rather be threatening my opponent with my 4 mana creature in green than playing it and saying, alright, now you have to watch out for the next few turns. I'm going to play stuff and they're going to come in bigger. And I really hate 3 toughness. That means she dies to Lightning Bolt. I don't want my mid-range threat being able to be bolted or incinerated away, especially now that we've upgraded the burn in red. Next up is Crashing Footfalls, and it looks pretty good on turn 1 when you play a forest and cast it, and then on turn 4 you get 2 4/4 green rhino creatures. Like, that seems really solid, but there is a big downside.
If I need bodies, rhinos will get me killed.
Yeah, they're not going to help you stabilize against the aggro deck, and they're not going to come down and immediately threaten control decks either. They're going to have a lot of time to prepare for them. So we're going to cut these in favor of some other threats instead to try and boost our mid-range deck. Merfolk Branchwalker seems solid. She's not as good as Grapple with the Past for milling into your graveyard, but she does still support that. Lovestruck Beast is just a much better body. If you haven't checked out our Card of the Week video on Lovestruck Beast and how much I love this card, you need to. I like Call of the Herd a lot better than Crashing Footfalls for the simple reason that the turn I cast it is the turn I get the token. I know it's not as mana efficient, but there is another big upside.
You can flash it back from your graveyard and create another elephant. This is good for avoiding board wipes, because after the board wipes you can create the token.
Now what you're starting to see here is the beginnings of our green mid-range deck, and I'm going to keep adding tools to it so that it can be more effective. This cube also plays Snare Spinner, which is like a reachy creature with some upside. I'm going to do something different with that slot instead. It plays Return to Nature as well, but I've played Return to Nature in cube. It's mostly a sideboard card, and you only bring it in if your opponent has the really dangerous artifact or enchantment. And then lastly, Giant Growth is a combat trick, and again, we don't play combat tricks because you can get 2 for 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove these cards, and we cut Disenchant earlier in white, so this is where I'm going to replace that effect. We're going to play Reclamation Sage and Thrashing Brontodon. Reclamation Sage is going to remove artifacts and enchantments, and so does Brontodon, but he's actually got a really relevant body on him. That 3/4 body is nothing to sneeze at. I'm actually becoming a believer in this card, playtesting it in my own cube. I'm going to cut the Rec Sage and play the Brontodon. And then lastly is Wolfear Avenger.
You can regenerate him, and Flash stresses the control players.
Avenger is actually another piece of the Unga Bunga package. Again, check that video out. It's definitely worth your time. but he is going to stress out control players and be really, really hard to remove. Now, as we move up green's curve, we're going to see some other problematic cards. For example, Arasta. Arasta seems so cool, except that you are dependent on your opponent to cast the instants and sorceries for you to make the spiders. So if it's going to be a problem for them, they just won't. They won't cast an instant or sorcery until they remove Arasta. Challenger Troll is a 5-mana 6/5 that only has upside if you have more 4-power creatures on the board. He's kind of a win more card, and we want to avoid that. We can do better in his slot. Essence of the Wild, creatures you control enter the battlefield as copies of him. So ideally, you cast him, and then you play Llanowar Elves or something after it, and then you have more Essences of the Wild. And that seems fine, and it is in regular limited, but not in cube. In cube, you want your 6-mana green drop to end the game or threaten to end the game. Speaking of in the game, Gaia's Revenge is supposed to be our fatty cheat ramp target that closes out games for us. Can't be countered is nice, although to be honest, we don't really want to be casting him. We'd much rather cheat this guy into play. He has Shroud, which is sweet, or semi-shroud, and then he has Haste as well. But you know what he doesn't have?
Trample. They'll just block him.
So we're going to cut all of this stuff as well, and we're going to add in Wicked Wolf for our mid-range decks. I've really become a believer in this card. The fight ability is just something green wants. Deep Forest Hermit is going to help our Selesnya token decks, and it's going to go wide. It's going to be harder to remove. I love me some Hermit. He's actually really affordable. And then Thragtusk as well is another thing to help out our token decks, and he's a stickier threat because he leaves behind a body after he dies. Now, if we want to end the game at the top end of the green curve, there's no better choice, especially on a budget, than Enray's Forerunners.
Vigilance, Trample, Haste. He makes my other creatures bigger and gives them trample. Basically, he says, I win.
Yeah, what he said. All of that. Enray's Forerunners comes down and closes out the game. That 7/7 body is great even the turn after. If for some reason you manage to come up short or your opponent is able to throw away all their creatures and, in the game at 4 life, you just kill him with the Forerunners the next turn. Enray's Forerunners does it all. He's a great cheat target. He's a great ramp target. It's fantastic. Now, the other thing the green deck in this cube is running is some weird Graveyard Matters cards like Gnaw to the Bone. Gain 2 life for each creature in your yard, and you can flash it back. So again, there's that self-mill theme in Golgari we'll talk more about, but I just don't like this card. Life gain is not how you win games in Cube. So instead, we're just going to cut it for Bond of Flourishing. We can't afford Once Upon a Time, but to be honest, I'm playing Bond and Once Upon a Time in my cube. The fact that you can reveal and keep any permanent is solid, and the life gain matters more than you think it would. Like, it doesn't help you win, but against aggro decks, it will buy you a turn. Savage Punch is another green removal spell that they play in this cube, but this is where we are going to get to live the big life and slide in a Planeswalker, boys and girls. That's right, we're going to add in Vivien, Champion of the Wilds.
Playing creatures at flash speed is good. Giving creatures vigilance and reach is also good. Lastly, searching for more creatures from your library is even better.
Vivien is a very decent 3-mana walker. The fact that you can ramp her out on turn 2 with Llanowar Elves will frequently put her out on an empty board, and then you can stress that control player we were talking about earlier. Now, she's not Garruk, and she's not Nissa, she's not in the top tier of green walkers, and because this cube is at 360, you may end up cutting her in the long run. But it's going to be a while, and Vivien is going to be very serviceable. She's going to see main deck play every time she gets drafted out of this cube. Alright, that means it's time for a budget report. Kid, how...
We spent $7.98.
Green actually got the most cards and spent the least amount of money of all the colors in our cube. Now, we're going to push on to Colorless. There is a weird vehicles theme happening in Colorless, and I am not opposed to vehicles inside a cube, but we're going to cut the bad ones, which is all of these. Instead, we're going to play some good vehicles, like Aethersphere Harvester and Smuggler's Copter.
Thank you, Wizards, for banning...
Yeah, a few months ago we wouldn't have been able to afford this for our cube, but now we can have Smuggler's Copter and it's not going anywhere. Aethersphere Harvester is also really, really good. The crew cost of 1 means that your tokens or your Llanowar Elves are suddenly hopping in this Harvester and flying over there and slapping around your opponent. Now, Scroll of Fate is a sneaky include because it plays almost like a Planeswalker, but your opponent can't attack it. You just tap it and make a 2/2 every single turn, and the Precursor Golem is going to make a lot of golems when he goes down.
Hey Dad, both of these help our token.
They do, and that's the point of Colorless in Cube. These cards are supposed to help support the archetypes that we have going on inside our cube otherwise. Now, next up is Gleaming Barrier, some bad equipment. Juggernaut is a reasonable body, and then Lesser Mastercore is meant to be like our early aggro drop that we can put down in our decks, but we're going to trim all of these for some better cards. We're going to play Signal Pest, who I love, Bone Splitter, which is one of the better equipments that's super affordable, Endless One, and Porcelain Legionnaire.
Ooh, an endless one. He's an Eldrazi.
So Signal Pest and you and your Eldrazi kid. Signal Pest is going to help our aggro decks and our token decks, and he's fantastic in both decks. Bone Splitter is going to be good for aggro and mid-range, and Endless One might look unexciting.
You can cast him on turn 2, turn 3, turn 4. He gets better every single time.
The fact of the matter is, Endless One fits your curve wherever you have a hole in it, which means it's going to see main deck play every time it gets drafted. This card is not going to come out of your cube. You're going to be surprised how much you like having the Endless One in your cube. And Porcelain Legionnaire might look like he is a white card, but the fact of the matter is any aggro deck wants to play him, and they're not going to care about paying 2 life to drop him on curve. Now, next up, we're playing some more mediocre cards, and you might have noticed earlier in the cube where I started cutting some of the bigger black and green creatures that I didn't like and lowering the curve. That does hurt our Reanimator deck. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to cut the Sorcerer's Broom and the Enchanted Carriage, because 5 mana for a 4/4, even if it makes tokens, is just mediocre at best. And now we're going to add in some real Reanimator targets. We're going to play Ancient Stone Idol and Sundering Titan. Neither of these cards is coming out anytime soon, and the thing I like about these cards is they're colorless, which means the green ramp deck can play them, or a artifact deck with some artifact ramp can play them. They fit into the Reanimator deck. They do so many things because they're colorless. It doesn't matter which deck drafts them. Stone Idol leaves behind bodies when it dies, and Sundering Titan, just yikes. And can you imagine flickering this card? There is a blink archetype inside this cube. You could flicker the Sundering Titan and then, not have friends anymore. Next up is the Amorphous Axe. The Amorphous Axe is just a mediocre equipment, but there's one problem with this equipment.
3 mana to equip is way too much.
Yeah, I don't like my equipment to equip at 3 mana. I feel like that's just a little too high. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut that. I wish I could say that I got to add in Sigments or Talismans, but they really blew out our budget. They're almost $1 each. So that's something you might do later. We couldn't even do Mind Stone, but we can cut the Amorphous Axe and play Worn Power Stone, which is the beginnings of some artifact ramp inside this cube. It's not a lot, but it's a start, and you can work on getting some more fair artifact ramp in here later. By the way, CBS, do not put Soul Ring in here. You've probably got one laying around the house, but it's way too powerful for this cube. Now,
I know, Dad. I know what you're going to say. We spent $5.71 on Colorless.
so we're doing pretty good, but we still have the guild cards to do, so let's get started on those. Mostly what I tried to do in the guild section, because we are definitely starting to run out of money, is to support the archetypes that are already existing there. For example, Azurius runs a blink deck. We're going to sub out Lavinia and add in the best blink card the cube isn't running, and that's Soul Herder. And then in the Dimir section, we're going to make a really small change. They're playing Connive Concoct, which is mediocre at best, and instead we could play something like Discovery Dispersal, which I am a huge fan of. It helps our cantrips. It helps the Reanimator decks because it mills to the graveyard. It does all the things. It can be played in a black-red deck instead of a blue-black deck. It's so flexible. I love some Discovery Dispersal. So that takes care of Azurius and Dimir, and that brings us to Selesnya. Selesnya is the token archetype, and for some reason they're playing Wayfaring Temple, which deals combat damage. When it deals combat damage to a player, it populates, and it is a payoff for being wide. But instead of that, I'd rather play a payoff that actually makes us a little wider. So we're going to play Tolsimir, Friend of Wolves. Now, if I were you, CBS, and you're listening, I'd pony up the extra dollar and buy Tristani Discordant, who buffs all your tokens in addition to making more bodies. There are actually a lot of really solid cube cards that Selesnya needs some help with in this cube. Like Night of Autumn or March of the Multitudes, all of those will help out your token decks or be great utility creatures. But we're on a budget, so we're going to press on to Golgari.
Yay, it's Mom's favorite guild.
Is a self-mill theme inside the Golgari section of the cube, and I'm gonna add in a card that I have to be honest you could easily cut for a whole lot of different stuff, and that is Grizzly Salvage. Grizzly Salvage is a self-mill card that also lets you return a creature or a land, whichever you need, from your graveyard back to your hand. So if you're missing your land on turn 2, you don't have your third land drop, you can get it. Don't have a solid creature in hand, you can mill and get it, or you can mill that creature into the graveyard to be reanimated for later. This is not a staple. This is a compromise. We can't play Assassin's Trophy or Vraska or the new Garrick or any of the really awesome Golgari cards that I would like to have included instead, so Grizzly Salvage is a compromise. Still, let's keep going and move on to Cube, and they're playing Maw of the Obsidet as a sacrifice outlet.
But Dad, we need more Blood Artist effects.
We do, and that's why we're just going to cut him for the Cruel Celebrant. She's another Blood Artist, and she extends the Aristocrats deck into Orzhov. Now they have another Blood Artist effect as well. Now let's talk about the guild that just really made me chuckle when I started looking this cube list over, and that's Boros. Boros plays Dwarf Tribal plus Vehicles.
Spoiler alert, dwarves suck.
Easy there, Spartacus. It's not quite that serious. Yes, they are subpar, and so we're going to start cutting them out immediately. We're going to axe Dapala and Veteran Motorist for some cards to help our Boros aggro deck. And the number one thing you need in an aggro deck is 1-drops. So we're going to add in Figure of Destiny. I can't believe they weren't playing him because he's so cheap anyway. And then we're going to play the split card Integrity Intervention. I have been pleasantly surprised playing this card in my cube. It performs far better than a combat trick should because you have the backside Lightning Helix effect, and for some reason 4 mana just never feels that bad. Most of the time you're holding up your burn towards the end of the game anyway, and if not, you just play it as a combat trick. It works surprisingly well. You will eventually cut it, maybe. I don't know. I've had a lot of good luck with it. That hybrid mana cost on Integrity is actually pretty something. Like, it's not nothing. The fact that you can play it in mono red or mono white is really good. Now next we're going to move to Izzet, and Izzet is playing the classic Spells Matters theme with Nivix and Rouse Outburst.
But Dad, we can't afford the best Izzet.
Daniel is 100% right. Even the Saheeli from War of the Spark breaks our budget. But if you can pick her up, CBS, I would. What we're going to do instead is we're going to play a solid removal cantrip, and that's Electrolyze. Card is extremely playable. 3 mana seems like a lot, but the Izzet deck loves the fact that this card replaces itself in your hand. And we're going to play Crackling Drake. This card is coming out later. As a matter of fact, it might come out with the next set. I'm already looking at some spoilers for my Ikoria, and there's a sweet little baby dragon I would probably play in his place just because it's more castable. Still, he cantrips when he comes in, and the mana base in this cube is really clunky, so I doubt anyone's going 3 colors anyway. He'll be fine for now. Moving on, we get to the Simic guild, and this used to be the guild that everyone looked at and went, these cards all stink, and now the Simic guild is one of the most expensive guilds in cube, with Oko and Uro and Hydroid Krasis. So in this cube, we're playing a ramp-style Simic deck. And so what we're going to do is we're going to replace them with some decent cards. You are going to have to upgrade one of them later. So we're going to add in another walker. We're going to take Kiora the Behemoth Beckoner. She's going to let us ramp, and she's castable in the green or the blue deck. And then we're going to play Incubation Incongruity. I have really enjoyed this split card. It's not a staple or anything, but it's very solid. The ability to cantrip through the top 5 cards of your library and grab what you need, or the removal spell on the back half and just giving them a frog lizard, can be great when your opponent lands that game-ending threat and you're like, no. Have a 3/3 green elk. I mean frog. Frog. Definitely frog.
Dad, that was a lame joke.
I mean, you ain't got to call me out where everybody can hear. You could have waited till we stopped recording. Now, one of the things I am really thrilled about in this cube is the Rakdos section. We got to upgrade the Rakdos section on the cheap. They're already playing a Rakdos aristocrat style deck, so we get to play pretty much the best aristocrat stuff available. We're going to make our aggressive deck better and increase the density of our Blood Artifacts. We're going to play Judith the Scourge Diva, Mayhem Devil, and Fireblade Artist. In CBS, this is a steal. These cards are so cheap, and you get to upgrade, and they're not coming out. They're not coming out until you can get a hold of something like Daretti or Kolaghan's Command. And honestly, I don't really like playing removal in my gold section, so I would just add in Daretti, not use Kolaghan's Command, cut Mayhem Devil, and call it a day. Judy, Fireblade Artist, Mayhem Devil, now you have an Aristocrats deck in your cube.
Dad, hurry up, we're almost done.
Yes, we are, and thank goodness. We're going to go to Gruel now, and Gruel is playing Gallia of the Endless Dance. Yeah, he's not wrong there. The card looks like a party, but the fact of the matter is we've cut all the satyrs, because satyr tribal is just not going to cut it. Instead, our Gruel deck is kind of mid-rangey, so we're going to cut that and instead add a real mid-range green threat in Regisaur Alpha.
Dino!
Yeah, Gruel wants Smash, not satyrs, so we're going to play the Regisaur Alpha, and that gets us to the end.
Dad, what about that really crappy card that you showed us in the first video?
Oh, I'd almost forgotten about that stupid Warden of the Chain. Why'd you have to bring that up? Now I'm emotionally scarred. Alright, so we're going to cut the Warden of the Chain just because I can't stand to look at his face. And we're going to splurge, and we're going to go big or go home, and we're going to add in Dammuri, Anarch of Boros, the best card in Gruel. And he's on the high end of our budget, and we are definitely running out of money. But you gotta have Dammuri. This Dammuri is so sweet. He's the man. We're going to add him to the cube, and that's going to do it for Gruel, and that's going to finish our cube upgrades.
Dad, you forgot lands.
That's right, we did forget lands. So the cube is running a suite of tap lands, and then your slow fetches like Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse and things like that. So let's take a minute and look at how we can upgrade the land package in this cube on a budget.
It's too expensive to upgrade the lands in this cube.
The thing is that we're working on a real budget, and while you do want to upgrade the mana base in this cube, we're not going to be able to do it on our first push without really blowing out the budget. My advice to you, CBS, is that if you don't already have them, the first thing you're going to want to do is shock lands. Now, rotation is coming. It's going to happen in August, September, right around that time. I don't know what Wizards is going to do with their release schedule, but once rotation happens, all those shock lands in Standard are going to move to Pioneer and Modern, and that's probably the last time their price is going to dip, if at all, for a while. So if I was you, that's my number one target, is I'm trying to trade into shock lands or scoop them up after rotation. And that's going to do it for our cube. Again, D, we've added 119 cards into this cube. What's our budget looking like?
We spent $62.10.
$62.10 for 119 cards is going to change a third of this cube for very little money in the grand scheme. As a matter of fact, I want you guys to realize that that's even including shipping on this buy list. Now, if you are interested in the cards that we've added to this cube, there's a list in the show notes below, a link to TCG Player, and you can go buy any of the cards on that list that you want. Or if you're playing the Card Kingdom Starter Cube, this most recent post-Theros version, then you can go online and upgrade your cube right along with CBS. It's a really great value. But if you don't want to buy cards to upgrade your cube, instead, you can enter to win this cube. That's right, we're giving away a copy of this upgraded Card Kingdom Starter Cube, and the way you enter is simple. Do some kindness. In the link in the show notes below is a link to a GoFundMe for UNC Hospital. I'm a transplant patient. I got my kidney a year ago. My brother, he donated it to me, saved my life. Those of you who listened to last week's episode heard all of this. So I'm looking to give something back to someone else at UNC Hospital and raise some money and help some kidney patients pay off some of their bills in this time of financial strain and stress, shall we say. So do some kindness. Follow the link to GoFundMe, donate $5 and be entered to win a copy of this Card Kingdom Starter Cube. You need to do it soon. We're going to pick the winner on Thursday and then announce it here on the channel next week, Sunday. So good luck. Happy cubing. Hit the like and subscribe button. Leave a comment for CBS in the show notes below. Put him on some other budget cards he might could use to upgrade his cube. And as always, and until next time,
Shuffle up and keep cubing, our friends.